We were looking at this picture yesterday of Shea and this animal, and I didn't realize until that point that I, all as well as Randy, couldn't tell the difference from a horse and a donkey.
Nope, mule.
Not even, yeah, I was gonna say this.
The
Not even
mule,
a
okay.
donkey.
Is there a
It's a
difference?
mule.
Yeah,
there's a difference.
there is.
The donkey
It's
is an actual
genetics.
animal.
Yeah. So, and this is very high level. If any equestrians are listening, I do legitimately know the difference. But essentially, a mule is a combination of a donkey and a horse.
Shay, let me
Just
assuage your
learned.
worries.
I just
I
learned
don't know
something.
that.
I
There you
don't
go.
think you
It's
guys
just-
are like necessarily going to now go into a rabbit hole of, the different equestrian and everything. But yeah, that is.
Well, I saw the pictures that you sent us, and I'm like, I didn't even know you did this kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's like, right, neurodivergence. That was always my hyperfixation. So I remember probably at 3 begging my parents to let me ride horses, and finally at 5 they caved in. And I still am in touch with my riding instructor from when I was 5.
And you like now own a farm or something like that, right, Shay?
I do.
Living the dream.
For now. I own a little over 5 acres, and then all of my animals are rescues, including my dogs and my cat. So I have a barn cat, 2 dogs. One came with the farm. That's a whole story. And then I have 2 horses from a local rescue, and I own 1 mini mule, which is like 3 feet tall, from another rescue in Texas. And then I'm doing a mule training challenge, which is that mule that I sent you the picture of. His name's Howie. He's so sweet.
So if anybody doesn't know who we're talking to, this is Shay. I wanted to, Shay, I actually hadn't talked to you in a long time. I think we see each other in passing, like on the internet, right? That's how it goes these days. But I first met you at USA, and I remember I was teaching the front end cohort, and you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were either like a lead or a project manager or a senior at the point, and there was one of the engineers that was going to join your team was in my cohort.
Yeah. And then I think I ended up making Lorraine her mentor, which flip, Randy had me be Lorraine's mentor. And Randy was mine. So like it's a, full
small
circle.
world.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, I think it's really crazy though, that how small this world feels. If you look at like the Discord server right now, there's a growing like USA population in there.
I mean, I think a lot of us that are there, sort of. Well, and Shay, this isn't true for you, which is really fascinating for me to say, and that's that like a lot of us started our tech journey at USA, and so like of course lots of strong roots grown there, but of course you had a tech journey that had started before you got to USA. You came as an experienced engineer.
I did. Something you might not know is I used to, back when I was like a little 19-year-old, maybe 18-year-old, train cafeteria ladies all across Tennessee how to use a computer system that was essentially written by like 2 engineers in Bash. So like, yeah.
And am I misremembering, but like you also had some experience as like a DBA or something? Like I remember like you, maybe I'm misremembering. Just
nope,
tell us
you're
the
correct.
story.
Yeah. So I started as a DBA. I was a single mom and thinking about like, okay, now I have to be serious about supporting like my kid, and I can't do that teaching yoga, which is what I did at the time. And so I was looking into getting into healthcare as a radiographer because I don't do human blood well. Animal blood is fine because I used to be a vet tech. But yeah, my dad has been a DBA since that was a thing, and was like, you know what, watch me do this. I swear I'll drop it. Just actually follow me do this. And I watched him do it, and I was like, you get paid 6 figures for doing puzzles all day. And my dad was like kind of inherently offended by that statement, but then at the same time, he's like, no, yeah, I do. Yes, you're right. And so I got into DBA work, which I absolutely loved. And then that bled into full stack, which bled into front end, which inevitably I did not like the poor planning part of things and being an engineer and constantly getting blamed for someone else's short-sightedness. And so I asked my manager to let me step in, and he did. And that's how I got into the business side of things.
I want to ask a completely irrelevant question real quick, because you mentioned that like you saw what your dad was doing and you said like you get to solve puzzles all day. I have to ask, when your kids describe what you do, what are you, we're like all of us, we all have kids on this. I know exactly what my kids say I do. I want to hear how do your kids describe your job now?
Okay.
Especially since we're all remote. Tell me how your kids describe your job. Do they describe it as solving puzzles all day?
No. So for context, for the listeners, I'm now an engineer manager. So my kids describe what I do as teaching people how to do their job better. Which, yeah, like I kind of like, but it's better than yelling at people all day, right? Which is not how I lead. I'm normally the one that's like, hey, let's assume positive intent. Randy, who did I get that from? So yeah.
I think I'm interested to hear what Randy's kids say, especially as they get older, right? Like they're not quite talking yet, but like my 8-year-old, he'll say that I'm just on meetings all day. Like that's what I'm on a meeting. Like I'm on a call. Like that's what I do. So I'm interested in Randy's.
I mean, that's exactly what my oldest says is like even yesterday, he wanted me to he was like, you don't want to like, oh, so Shay, my son swaps his I's and his U's. So when he says you don't want to, he means I don't want to. Anyways, he's like, you don't want me to have to work. You don't want to have to go to a meeting. And I was like, I don't want to have to go to a meeting. You're right. Yeah. So Ram, very similar to you. My of course, my youngest has no idea. He says, Dad, I go bye-bye. I could like disappearing into the Bifrost for him. But my oldest believes that my job is essentially meetings, and he's not far off. That's a lot of what my day is.
Yeah, but it didn't always used to be like that, which is, I know we talked about this before, is that I talk about like career progression. Shay, you're an engineering manager, and today, Randy, we know that you have like this long title, right? But it ends up just, I think, the further along you go, you end up in more and more meetings. And then we think about like, is that really what we want to be doing?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's not. For anybody listening, we don't want to be in meetings all day, and we don't want you to be in meetings all day either.
Yeah, strongly agree.
It makes me think about Shay, you've been sharing some of this AI knowledge with us. AI is like the buzzword today, and I kind of see it being like different today than it was like with other stuff. Like with crypto, it's like, oh, it's a buzzword, right? It's very crypto, it's very buzzy, and maybe it's going to go away. You talk about Web3, it becomes very buzzy, and then it kind of starts to go away. But I'm really interested to hear, your take on like the current market with, AI and how, to me, it doesn't necessarily feel, maybe to you it feels the same or different, but it doesn't necessarily feel buzzy. It feels like it's actually going to stick.
I fully believe it will. I fully believe development as we know it now is changing. I do not think it will ever be what it is now. I was actually having a conversation about this last night on my Discord while gaming. And the way that I see it is AI and ML have been a thing, I don't know, probably past 10 years, but really only took roots within the past like 6 or 7. I think in the past 2, it's really exploded, hasn't it? Yeah.
It's definitely what it feels like.
And I feel like we're at the same crux we were when the World Wide Web got big. You know, like how after that happened, just everything as we knew it, the way that we interacted with technology completely shifted. And I feel that's where we are now. So if I were to put on my like future lens and everything, I don't think we'll be writing code anymore. I think we'll be training programs how to write code, and we'll have to be the smarter people to spot the issues and teach it prompt development better. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm going to make prompt development a word. Yeah, that's how I see it going. And then I see, you know, Ramiro, I think you're now in more of a business side as well. You know, the tech and the business. How do we know that you're not the future of writing code, where you understand everything from the epic down to the story level?
I like that you called this out and like been very obvious about it. Like some people online, they're like, "Oh, AI is not going to take our jobs," and
No.
I think that's true to an extent, right? And then there's the other part that's like, no, people that can leverage AI are going to take your jobs, right? And that's kind of the camp that I fall into, at least in the near term. And then eventually, you're just going to be able to put in a prompt that says, you know, through good prompt engineering, build me a site that does this, and it's going to do it all for you. And again, those engineers are kind of going to be out of a job. But the person who knows how to leverage that and how to fine tune those models, right? Potentially, if we're even dealing at that level at that point, are going to be the ones. So, you said you started back like in 2021 with like I guess getting into AI. You can get into that in a second. I just went to like a conference and I took a workshop by a guy named Gant Laborde on like TensorFlow and getting started there. Now, I know AI is not new, but when I went there, it just kind of like blew the doors off of what I thought I knew was possible, right? And it was simply because I was outside looking in. Um, and that's why I appreciate you kind of giving us this insight. You started back in 2021, and even just 2 years, how massive of a difference that is. And you shared a link with me. And I go and I start looking at this person's profile, and I'm like, okay, I'm over here, like I just jumped in the deep end, or I'm in the shallow end, and I've got to swim this whole ocean. Like I'm just barely getting started.
Yeah, she's absolutely one of my favorite people to follow on LinkedIn. Alex Wang. Like I don't honestly, I'm not even sure how she came across my feed. I'm pretty sure it was through like Grace Hopper or Women in Data Science, one of those organizations. The way that she's able to make the knowledge more accessible is such a cool thing to me. And Randy, this probably ties in more to your background, but if you think about like cultural relevance, right? That's a term you should remember from your teaching days. I feel that's what she's doing. And I feel that's what all three of us are doing in our, I'm going to say leadership positions, right? Like that's what we want. We want to make this stuff accessible. We want to make sure we're representing everyone in the data. Which, as we've seen from some companies, has not always gone well with AI or ML. And I shared another link with you because I went to a webinar with Elastic, and those were some of the questions that I was asking them about their generative AI. And the companies that are thinking about how to ethically source AI and ML, I think those are the ones that we need to pay more attention to.
Yeah, I have maybe a question here that's only a little related. You mentioned like Ram, you mentioned like crypto and Web3 and stuff and how those didn't stick. And I think even more recently we've had like VR and the metaverse. And I'm really curious, like I think what what do y'all think makes this stick? Of course, I mean I think both of you know I've been doing a little bit of obviously nothing in the LLM space, right? But like I mean, AI is not new. Like I did GANs way back in my time at USAA. Um, but like this is you know the rise of the large language model is very different. And so I'm curious why we think like there's such an immediate stickiness to this technology in a way that like we just watched Facebook or Meta fumble the metaverse, and I mean that was a $1 billion endeavor, right? Like, what makes this different with OpenAI and yeah, and large language models to y'all?
I'd say for me, because I'm, new in this space, is I think it's accessibility, right? Like, I'm not a data scientist by any means. If I'm looking at the three of us here, I'm probably the least smartest person, and that's just being honest, right? It's accessible, so folks like me, right, the average Joe can now work with these tools because really smart people have done all the hard work, and that's what makes it feel like it's sticking. If you were to go like want to get into VR, you got to go buy like a $300 headset. I mean, there's probably some cheaper ones, but like if you want to get into like Meta, it's $300. The Apple Vision Pro is like $18,000 or something, right? And so for me, it boils down to like accessibility. They made it extremely easy for me to get started in this space.
Yeah, I would second that. The things that you can do with it to streamline normal tasks, or if you're failing short in executive function, it can help with that too. My stepmom, not in IT, she's also a teacher, used it to help generate her TPT documents, teachers paid teachers. And I have another friend who's teaching a bunch of kids at a juvenile detention center, and she's generating lesson plans with it and having those kids check it, teaching them about what their future will be if they so choose to accept the challenge. Because that's the reality of it for all of us. Like, we can choose not to join generative AI. Doesn't mean it's going away. It's
Yeah,
here.
I mean, yeah, for sure. And I wonder, like, I guess a part of me is curious about this. Like, do we see any, like, I'm a bit, I'm maybe a bit of a skeptic, not about AI. I think you're absolutely right that it's staying around. I think that part of the reason that it's got such strong sticking power is that there's immediate implications on job and work productivity, which I think is a little worrisome to me, if I'm really honest. That's the part that I'm skeptical about, is like businesses have businesses' best interest in mind. And is this in the best human interest? Like, I think that's a really important conversation for us to have. Like, and then the other thing I think is like, is this improving uh our ability to like do leisure? Like, I think about like the metaverse and VR, and I mean, I'm going to ignore crypto and all of that because for other reasons, but like those things are sort of built to in some way they're built to directly targeting like the individual accessibility of leisure, right? um but I don't think I see that from AI, especially in the current ecosystem.
So this is probably a can of worms conversation, but it's we live in a society that's exploitative by nature. I think everybody can agree with that. That's capitalism. And how just society that we live in was founded, no, it's not going to give us leisure. It's just going to be another way that businesses and corporations can make more money. I wish that it gave us more free time, but I don't think as a species we've evolved to that level of intelligence yet.
So maybe not free time, but how do, like, I think maybe the thing that I would like maybe ask of y'all is like, how do you see ethical use of all of these tools that are like driven around productivity? And Ram, you and I have talked a lot about like the idea of productive isn't to be able to do more, it's to do less faster. And so like how do y'all see like the impacts, like the sort of like ethical use of AI, and not in terms of like, I think there's a whole side of that that I don't feel like I'm intelligent enough to have that conversation around like fair use and like uh whose art really is it? Like I mean, I think there's a really big conversation to have there. I'm not prepared to have it, but I think like what I think about is like how do we use AI in a way that is ethical for the people that are using it, not necessarily like there's the people that whose work made it possible, but the people that are actively using it today.
Well, I can align that to my most current situation. So I was impacted by the layoffs from Ernst & Young. There was roughly like over 350 of the US employees that were let go as a result of the company aligning more to a offshore workforce strategy, which now puts me back in the job hunting mode. Am I in the best mental space for that while I'm like also juggling everything else that I'm doing? Probably not. And so I'm able to use it to help me fact check what I'm typing. Like, am I phrasing this the best? Chat GTP, help me phrase this more professionally. Or shorten this, because some like boxes and resumes are not the same character count as the other ones you use. I don't have the mental capacity right now to do all of that, but hey, I don't have to. Chat GTP has it. I just have to make sure that it still makes sense when I read it. So that's how I've been leveraging it. And I think that you can do that in a lot of ways. How many of us actually understand the insurance application process when we're filling that out?
Oh, man, Ram,
Yeah.
I saw you come off mute, and I want to give you an opportunity, but Shea, you just made me realize that like I wonder if anybody has just taken like terms of service or user agreements and dumped them into ChatGPT and asked for a summary, because that's suddenly a brilliant way
They
to
have.
process.
They have. And I know someone, I'm not going to out them because they still work at a company that does risk and compliance, and dumped a lot of their knowledge in there to help them generate a plan. And it did so beautifully. So the way that you can make knowledge more accessible, I think, is the big selling point of generative AI and how we can ethically use it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, so I hadn't even thought about that to be now. See, that's how early I am. But I mean, I think that's a great use, right? Terms of service, nobody really reads those. But if I could tell AI, hey, shorten this into like, 100 words or less. Well, I can read 100 words. And you were talking about like, unfortunately, you've been affected by like these layoffs, and again, it goes back to what you talked about, right? Companies just want to make more money. It's not like they eliminated the jobs completely. They just offshored them, right? They just outsourced them and said, hey, instead of paying these more expensive people, we're going to get them cheaper. We're going to get the labor cheaper, and we're going to get it over here, right? So it comes back to that for big companies. But if you were like young, starting a company, I mean, we've been very vocal about this, Randy and I, right? The things that we're trying to do. Our goal is not to make as much money as possible, but our goal is to work as little as possible and still provide the same value. And that's what it comes back to, right? Is we want to provide value, but not necessarily at the highest price, or at the cost of people. And you're job hunting right now, right? Hopefully, I mean, maybe you have some stuff going on. Maybe you're building a company. We don't know. But if you're job hunting, like, who fills out cover letters? Like, nobody wants to fill out a cover letter, and that's a perfect opportunity for like ChatGPT or Bard. Hey, Bard, I'm also curious, like, do y'all assign like aliases or pet names? I just call Bard B. You know what I'm saying? He's like my buddy. He's like, hey B, help me out with this, and I'm like, hey B, write this cover letter for me. But yeah, so there's some really good use cases for like job hunters. One is the cover letter. One is to like give it a link to a like a job posting, and then have it summarize you and pull out the key skills or something like that to see if it aligns with what you're doing, instead of reading this really long summary. So there's things like that, right? But I think that's something that Randy and I've talked about quite a bit, is trying to be like mindful of the fact that even if you have something that allows you to increase your productivity or increase your efficiency, it's definitely not with the intention that we do more, right? And
Exactly.
so I think it's just something that's really important, and hopefully we don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, exactly. Because like sometimes, it can feel like, oh, well, now I can do this and that. And there's almost like you almost have to be very intentional about like ChatGPT did this thing for me that usually takes me 4 hours, and it did it in like 10 minutes. So I'm gonna go take the next 3 hours and 50 minutes off or whatever. Like, I don't know, maybe that's a little out of it. I mean, but I guess like that's the thing that I do think a lot about, because like it isn't effective. And I think that's part of what makes it so like immediately valuable, because like, I mean, we've used it. It's not perfect. Generative AI can give you some really interesting responses from time to time, or stuff that doesn't quite work. But I think that what's amazing or impressive is that even in these very early phases, like there's a lot of productivity to be garnered from it. There's a lot that you can get from it. And so like I think that as we get that, it is a good reminder that the ability to do more doesn't necessarily like do more. It means like create that space. I read this really funny quote. I think I've told you, Ram, where like, they're like, the promise of the future was that the robots would come and do all the work so that we could write books and create music. But it actually seems that like now the robots have come and like it's the exact opposite. They're writing the books and creating the music, and we're still doing all of like the work. Um, and I don't want that world. That's not the world I think any of us want.
Yeah. You talk about memes or exactly how you said that, but it reminds me of the one, I think it was on Twitter, and she's like, my 3-year-old said she wanted to be an astronaut, and I said she had to study hard, go to college, learn a lot of science, and take a physical fitness test, and she shrugged and said, that's just 4 things. So she's basically a nonchalant motivational speaker. And I feel like that a lot of the time, because I'm like, yeah, but you could just do this. And people are like, oh, but that's so much. I don't think it is anymore.
Yeah.
I think if you leverage the tools that are out there, it becomes a lot less. One of the things I personally hate doing, and we can talk about roles and how this falls on me in the family hierarchy, is grocery shopping and planning out meals for the week and the grocery list. And I absolutely loathe it. Like, it fills me with anger. I hate doing it. I don't have to anymore. Granted, some generative AI is still trying to kill me with my food allergies because it doesn't link iodine with fish, but I keep reminding it and it's learning from it. But you can throw that in there, tell it what your food allergies are, tell it what you want more of, like I want more vegetables than meat, and it will give you a grocery list. And then you can tell it to give you recipes. Like, it makes it so much easier, because then I just kind of have to puzzle where I want them. I don't have to spend the 2 hours that it took me before. Instead, I can spend 10 minutes and then go back to playing Tears of the Kingdom right now.
All right, Shay,
That's
I
what I
love
want to
this.
do.
I love this. And so Ram, I have to ask you, are you using ChatGPT to like automate any like home stuff?
Uh, I'm not, but I had this idea, and again, ideas are not new, so I'll just say it here because if somebody goes and builds it, they probably already built it, to be honest with you. But my wife loves to cook. She got into baking. She actually became a really good baker. I used to be the cook of the family. And then she took over, and like she makes these meals that when you see them on a plate, you're like, that came out of a restaurant. But no, I want to build something. I want to build an app that's basically called Sous Chef, and she can talk to it like on the iPad, and it'll tell
Nice.
you what step is next. So like if you're cooking spaghetti, um, one thing that people struggle with is like trying to juggle 2 things at a time. Like I know I need to have my noodles done at the same time that my sauce is done, right? So if you're in a certain step, it'll tell you it's time to start the boiling the water, right? Because it'll know it takes about 10 minutes for the water to boil, and it'll tell you when to drop the noodles. And so it's like your sous chef. It's right there constantly calling things out to you. And you can tell it, hey, we're going to pause on this. And so basically it's your assistant in the kitchen. Um, but if somebody's already built that, let me know what app that is, because I'll probably pay, $5 to $10 or whatever that is, because I'd use it. And if it's not there, and even if it's not there, I'm probably going to build it anyway, just to have my own version, because that's something that I want to automate. Is you're in the kitchen. The cool thing about this, I could go on and on about this, but the cool thing is, right, my wife will constantly change recipes and say, I'm going to use butter instead of oil. I'm going to use
Mm,
bananas instead of this. Or you can simply say, hey chef, double the recipe. And
Yeah.
just like that, you're going to have a recipe that's adapted to double. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Do it with
Yeah.
allergens and substitutions, and I guarantee you will make a lot of people happy. I have a friend that's gluten-free and allergic to eggs, and she loves when I bring her treats because I'm gluten-free. But I know how to bake. I'm not as good of a cook. I'm a baker. And so she's always excited because it's like, oh, something I can eat that doesn't taste like trash. Because a lot of gluten-free and vegan products do taste like trash, just full transparency.
So you mentioned that you bake more than you cook. Like you're out of unfortunately you're out of work right now.
Yeah.
What do you fill in the time with?
When I'm not job hunting, and updating and networking, the farm stuff, again, in that mule training challenge. So that's a lot of fun. I have been playing video games, been learning more about data and analytics and generative AI. Because again, like, hey, I have time, might as well get back into my passions. And then hopefully I'll be baking this week, since it's, July 4th week. Don't really
Nice.
want to go out in public a whole lot with a bunch of people. So, you know.
Yeah, what I love about that is, and Rem, you had a brief stint. There was someone to this a little while back, and Rem disappeared off the internet for a few weeks because he would spent all of his time out in his yard. In between ending one job and starting another. Like what I love about that is that, like, I don't know, you almost, there's like these brief stints in our lives um, where you get to live the life like you actually wanted to live, like you focus as much on work as you would actually want to focus on work, and then you do all the things that you would want to actually do: work out in the yard, bake, hang out with your mule or donkey or horse hybrid, your equestrian. I think that's the right word, right? Equestrian.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. But like what I love about that is that, like, everything in balance. I have a friend that's also job hunting right now, and they're like, I just set a goal of applying for 10 jobs. And then the faster I do that, the quicker I get back to high roll, because I think you can't open a car door right now without hitting somebody playing Tears of the Kingdom. Um,
I mean, I'm slightly obsessed with it though.
Oh wow.
For listeners, I have a Zelda tattoo because it's been my favorite game always. Like all the Zeldas. That's
That's
just, it's
dedication.
puzzles.
Oh.
It's just the more sensitive part of your arm. But no, I'm with you there, Randy. Like that's, your friend has the exactly correct approach to it, because it's just a moment in life. Like our life purpose and our life worth is not derived from what we contribute to companies. And
right.
that's a big issue that I had with one of the career coaches, was that like, oh, while you're processing all your feelings, like write down all your accomplishments that you've done at work, and then when you need a boost, look at what worth you bring. And I was like, hold on a minute, my worth is more than what I generate for a company. I have a problem with that. And I inherently believe they didn't mean it that way, but they are a career coach. So
Yeah.
again, exploitative by nature, right? Of course, they're going to focus in on what you bring a company. I know my worth is more than that. And I hope anybody else that's going, through job search right now or in this in-between process knows that they bring more to the table than what a company can profit off of.
I think that's a really,
Yeah.
go ahead, Ram. Sorry.
No, I was gonna Randy, you mentioned like I dropped off the face of the earth. So I was in between like work too. And the thing I did like almost all the time was tend my yard and my garden. And I got my yard in a pretty good shape, but now the sun's killing it, so it's almost for nothing. But I spent a lot of time outside, right? And it gives you a really good opportunity to see what would you be doing if you didn't have to work, right? Like if you didn't have to work the 9 to 5 job, the 40-hour a week job, what is it that you would be doing? And that's what I'm kind of curious for both of you is, because I know what I'd be doing. I'd very similar to what you'd be doing, Shay. My wife loves horses. She'd have a couple horses. I don't know if we'd have mule or donkeys because I couldn't tell the difference, but we'd have a couple horses, some chickens, and I'd be mowing my grass, and I'd be basically trying to create this greenscape for us that we love, and maybe having a little farmers market, right? That I would join. That's what I'd be doing probably. And I know Randy's kind of real similar, but I'd love to hear if you didn't have to job search, right? If you didn't have to work for someone else, right, to pay the bills, like what would that be?
Uh, honestly, I don't know. I'm not really good at sitting still, and I think that comes from me growing up in quote unquote poverty. And I say this very loosely because I was like high middle income, but in a really rich town growing up. So we were technically poor. Yeah. But we were not by any means poor. But yeah, it gave me that like poverty mindset. So, the hustle culture is real, and it's always been very hard for me to sit still. Lots of time outside because I love it. I love hiking. My partner and I, we have backpacks because we want to go hike down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back. He's never been, I've been. It's amazing. I love doing all things outdoors. I would probably be like some mix between like management because I want to continue helping people excel in their career. And I have a very open and transparent communication model, which I find true leaders really love. I've never had any issues with VPs or CEOs. It's always middle management with some ego problems that don't always see eye to eye because they haven't learned like the art of compassionate leadership yet. And then writing a book and spending more time anything outside. That's, outside is my happy place. Doesn't matter what I'm doing,
Yeah.
including mucking stalls.
Well, maybe not that, but I definitely like what I think there is a lot of symmetry there. And I generally think humans, we're made more for like outside. Like there've been lots of studies on, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, like even just like on the podcast, where like if you will spend one weekend outdoors a month, like the somatic impact of that will extend the entire month. Like we are a species that is built for outdoors. So like I think that's really important to call out. But the other thing that I really love about this is y'all are both very hopeful about the role of AI and like very like I don't know, y'all are I would say early adopters, optimists about it. And then like the thing that's playing through my head as we started this conversation, we're talking about how awesome the explosion of large language models and generative AI is. And now we're talking about like what do you do if you don't have to work? And I think that there is a clear and transparent line between those two, right? Like that's the optimistic future that an ethical use of generative AI could create for us, right? Is that like there's like this, Shay, you called it out, like there is a place and a worry, and a reality where AI is coming for some version of our jobs. And like that can set in a deep anxiety and like a a big concern to like reskill and retrain. And I think that there's value in that, not the anxiety part, but the need to understand that the role is constantly changing. That's the job that we're in. But the other part of that is sort of the hope that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing if AI came and took my job, because then I could spend my time outside. Like it can have it, it can, if it wants to sit on a Zoom call for 6 hours a day, I'm more than happy to give that away.
Right. Well, people talk about how to have meetings or how not to have meetings 6 times.
Or just going in circles. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is when we just talk in circles. And I think I've actually told somebody about this in the past. I said, I just don't like going in circles because that's what we're doing. So I just make the decision or I'll make the decision and let's move on with our lives. But like this whole idea, like I think 5 to 10 years from now, I might be considered an early adopter. Right now, I'm pretty late to the game, like relatively speaking, right? Because AI has been around for 50 years or since like the 1950s. It's again has to do with accessibility, which is the reason why I'm able to start playing in that space. The OpenAI API is really cool. I've been playing with that. Built something this week that allows us to like, talk to it, and we get to be able to book an appointment with like we eliminated like 10 steps, which is pretty stinking amazing because
That's
all
awesome.
I need is like one or two things in a small sentence and we're done. It doesn't even have to be a whole sentence. And that's the great part. But I was getting to this is that like I know I've looked for a job, and so I know Shay's listened. It's funny because Shay's like, "Oh yeah, you've talked about this in the past," and it's kind of interesting that Shay's probably like the one person that's listened to every single episode. Probably, maybe not, but you know, at USA after USA, because I was there for 4.5 years, and I jumped from like job to job to job, right? Like I didn't really feel like satisfied. I mean, Randy knows
Mhm.
I've been in quite a bit of jobs in the last 2 years, like a whole lot. I feel like.
Welcome to neurodivergence.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that, you know, like especially when I got to stored, when you're at USA, you have lots of structure in place, right? It's an enterprise. There's lots of rigor, lots of structure. You can't do anything on your own. I mean, there's so many like safeguards, except for the hack that just recently happened or whatever, but the data breach. But
Data
relatively
breach.
speaking, yeah, data breach. Relatively speaking, there's a lot of rigor in place, right? And then you go outside of that, and you go into a smaller startup, right? And you're like, wait a minute, we can do what this startup is doing, and you start to feel empowered, right? And I go to another startup, and I'm like, I could do what this startup is doing. I mean, of course, it
Yeah.
takes to build this, right? And then I go to another startup, and it's like, I could do what this company is doing, right? I have the skills to do it, and then you get to the point to where you're like, okay, I'm tired of saying I can do what this company can do, and we're going to go do what these companies are doing in our
Yeah.
own, the thing that makes sense to us. So that's where we are today. I love that like you're in like the AI space because you've been following us. You know what CoGym is, right? It's a way to give back. So I'm going to talk about this for a second, and you'll see why. CoGym is intended to like empower. It's supposed to be the bridge between like these really long, expensive boot camps that take thousands and thousands of dollars. People come out, they go through them really fast, and you don't retain but a fraction of the information. And then you have YouTube, which is free, and you have like Udemy, and you have these videos at 10, $15, right? And here you are in the middle, right? CoGym, workshops on a regular cadence that allow you to level up. I say all that to say this because hopefully, Shay, you've been in AI for a little bit. Randy's got a, you know, again, he's built some stuff in AI. He's basically a scientist. That's what I usually tell people because he has like 3 degrees or something, and he's basically a scientist, right? So I can't wait till we get to the point to where, you know, we're doing workshops, and then here comes Shay, you know, also giving a workshop. So I
Yeah.
look forward to that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, on both sides of the table. Like I look forward to, we talk a lot about CoGem, and I think like part of the conversation here that I'm taking away in RAM, I think this has impact as soon as tomorrow, is that it is 100% important that we are able to communicate the importance and the effective use of AI even early on, like even at that very start. And like I think that's really important. That's one thing that I'm taking away from this. But all like the bigger picture there is that if we're really wanting to prepare engineers for a future role in this field, like AI has to be a part of the conversation. We do need to be talking about it, providing workshops, and of course, it's always been the goal, the hope that we can bring on experts in the field to have those conversations instead of us. And so, yeah, it'd be really awesome if as we start to think about what that looks like, if Shay, you wanted to use some of your free time to put on a small workshop on some AI tools.
Sure. I might reach out to some of my network to see how to, diversify it a bit because that's always my goal. If I have the spotlight, I'd like to share it with somebody else that can also bring a bigger picture to it. And still a current USAA employee, but she's wicked smart in data science.
Yeah, lots of good people at USA. I mean,
Yeah.
We talk very fondly about USA on this podcast because, well, like I mentioned at the start, it's where most of us cut our teeth in engineering. So you have all of that. But like Ram, the thing you just painted, the story you just told of like you started USA and you have all of these boundaries and constraints, and then you move to a startup, and it's kind of like moving from like to the Wild West. Like it's like you go
Yeah.
back in time a little bit to like you're in this very like civilized future where there's like rules and laws and
Yep.
processes and procedures and road signs, and then you like go to a startup and it's like you just build the house wherever the house goes. And oh,
Yeah.
the house is going to go right there this time. And so that's where it went. And now you're just driving down these really crooked streets. And like, I mean, so definitely there was an advantage to starting at USA in the way that like it allowed you to be a sous chef in a way, instead of just kind of being like, here's all the ingredients, make the pie. I don't know, y'all. I'm not a baker. I'm the only one. I'm like at such a disadvantage on this because like I don't cook at all. Um, like I could use instructions for how to make spaghetti. And I know that's like I like
It's okay.
you know,
My dad's overboiled pasta before, so I get it.
I literally just learned that that's a thing, like right now. But what I guess I'm saying is like, so there's an advantage to that because then, like, I don't know, I had this really reflective moment as I left the enterprise, and even while I was still there and starting to do consulting outside of USA, and realizing that like I learned a lot there. I learned a lot. Like, I mean, something as simple as like the idea of a gateway. Like I would go and do consulting with other companies, or I'd go to a startup and I'd be like, "Oh, you don't have a gateway? Like that's how we do this. You just put a gateway." And I would have never known any of that if I hadn't, been green at USA.
You know,
So
yeah. Sorry, finish your thought.
no, that was it. Just like the idea that like, you know, uh, I think enterprises get a hard time, and like you mentioned, like there's really smart people. You're saying really there's lots of really really great folks there.
There are, and I think that's what USA does really well, and I'm sure that's still at root the foundation was the community, because that comes from the whole military tie back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do that exceptionally well. At EY, part of the workforce that just left was also very much previous USAA people. So 4 or 5 of us in total that I worked very closely with, and different business, titles that they had at EY, but they're basically not a large company like we would think of like USAA. They're a bunch of small startups everywhere. And so we
Oh,
had all of
interesting.
those process problems and people not understanding what a gateway was and things being built terribly because there wasn't the same rigor and structure and community, and that entire culture of, bringing those up around you. And that was the thing that while I was doing my other duties, I really focused on, because I'm like, well, if we want to fix all this stuff, we have to like start talking to each other.
Yeah.
And right now,
Yeah.
nobody trusts anybody because we're in meetings where we're cussing at each other. And I'm not down for that. You're going to get a whole other side of me if you're going to come swearing at me. And like, we don't need to be that way at work because that's not professional and it's not doing anybody any favors. So it was a big shift where when I left, and this is forever going to be the thing that I'm most proud of, is we started having learning hours, like dev lead syncs turned into sharing knowledge. We started actually documenting things and approaching solutions innovatively and collaboratively instead of everybody just, we're so burnt out by the bad code base, but we can't do anything about it. And I was like, why can't you do anything better? Like, take the time and do it. It's going to make your life better. Work smarter, not harder, people. That's where generative AI is going to help you out too. Like, you don't have to bang your head into a wall. Somebody else has already thought about it. See what's out there.
Yeah.
I love that, Shay. Oh, sorry, Ram. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I love the idea of being able to do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's again one of the reasons that, especially in this market, if you're struggling, right, to find a job, maybe you do something about it and you go build your own thing, right? You feel empowered.
Right.
I know that this conversation could go on forever, Shay. It was really nice, but we want to let people know how do they get it, how do they connect with you?
For your Discord is honestly gonna be the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn. SheaDLady, I think, is my
I
love
do
it.
love that. I love that handle.
I don't think I just realized that was the handle.
Well, yeah.
I love it.
Shea Dahl, so SheaDLady. It's something that I got as like a alias when I was a teenager, and I just was like, this is kind of cool. I'm gonna keep it. So
Love it.
yeah, I would love to talk to people more through, is it Amazingly Average?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, on Discord. It's turning out to be pretty cool. And I'm probably going to end up sharing it with the other 300 plus people in the EY Discord that I created for all of us looking for new career opportunities, because lots of really smart people in there as well.
We appreciate that. Bring them over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
happily.
sure. Well, Shay,
Happily.
this has been a really great conversation. I just want to I think the thing you said something a second ago, and it really stood out to me. You know, Ram, a little while back we talked about AI, and I kind of closed and said we have to be really creative right now. Like that's we need to be creative. And I think that there's been something else that kind of stands out to me in this conversation, and that's that and this what's great about this is that it's true with or without AI, and that's that we can't forget our humanity. We can't you talk about management styles and meetings that maybe don't demonstrate the respect and dignity that we would hope they would. And to me that just speaks to that we've forgotten our humanity. And I think even with the impending robot overlords, it's even maybe more important that we just remember our humanity.
I agree. I agree. And I think as you know, gatekeepers of a different way, right? Like we have our knowledge. We don't want to gatekeep. We want to make it accessible, and we can shape that future.